My name is Ben Wander, and I am one of the founders of the Wandering Band, and also its lead designer.
So Ben, you made a open world city building exploration game. Talk about what this game's all about.
Yeah, so you basically got it. Airborne Kingdom is a pretty unique combination of management and exploration. You're trying to build up this kingdom in the skies, and it's kind of your own unique little kingdom that you can build with the parts you find and what you choose to research. But at the same time, you have to keep it aloft. You have to keep it in the air. And so you do that by moving around the world and constantly being on the lookout for resources that can help you build and fuel that can help you kind of stay in the air, along with, things like balance and speed and all of these other things that come into play. So yeah, it's really cool. It's really unique. It's like this mash of genres that ends up working really well together.
Yeah, talk about some of the inspirations for this, because immediately when I saw your gameplay trailer, I thought the first game that came to mind was BioShock Infinite. Probably just because that was a floating city, and you play in the floating city the whole game.
Yeah, so really we started this off as like, we knew we wanted to make some type of management game pretty early on, like when we were still talking about concepts. And we thought, well, what if, kind of management games have been done in all different places, and we hadn't seen anything in the skies before. So originally it was like a hotel management game, and we're like, what if the hotel was in the sky? And then we kind of thought of that, and we're like, why would you just manage the hotel? Manage the whole thing, manage the whole big city, kingdom, whatever it ends up being. And so that was kind of our inspiration. We were getting a lot of like just artistic inspiration at that time. There's a Castle in the Sky, Laputa, which is like a Ghibli film, and all of these wonderful kind of drawing and art books. Our art director, Chi Fong, has like a bunch of different art books that are all these like sketches of fantastical different things, and some of them were sky cities, other ones were like even like animals in the sky, like whales floating around, and it just kind of got us churning about ideas and fantastical sky things. And that was really the core. And then when the game really took off was when our programmer, Fred, we had a city in the sky, and he said, man, if this is in the sky, I want it to move. It has to go somewhere. And we went, okay, like that's easy to prototype. Let's add like right click to move. It's an RPG, whatever, let's do it. And that was when we realized like, oh, okay, this is different. This is special. Now we have something. And that's really when I would consider like we started developing in earnest on it, was right after we added the move functionality and understood like, okay, this could be cool.
So like in your game, the exploration aspect, the moving the city, you go to different areas in this vast map, and you can approach cities and like help them with their problems, and like kind of, I don't want to say like consume them into your own city, but like add their technology to their own, or like add different things to your own city and stuff like that. The
yeah,
RPG
absolutely. Yeah, so yeah, you've touched on a couple things there, right? So the kind of the idea behind the world itself and kind of the backstory and the lore to it is that all of these kingdoms are on this barren world, and they've lost contact with each other. And so they all have these individual problems that kind of can be solved by something else in the world around them. And because you're the flying city, you can kind of connect things. You know how to solve certain problems from other places that you've been, or from technologies that you found and things like that. So that's kind of like the story aspect to like how you're helping everybody and why you're helping them. And they're also, because they're so isolated, they've kind of developed technologies in their own unique ways, and they found things around them from the people who we call the ancients, really the forerunners or the precursors to the society of today. And they've developed them in different ways. So when you reach them, you can kind of see what they have and research your own technology based around that. It's like a similar technology, but you have to know how to make it in the sky. How do we make it light enough? How do we make it movable? How do we make it a thing that we want to do? And so basically the order that you run into the cities and which technologies that you choose to research really dictates like how your city looks. And it can look and play pretty differently depending on that. And so that was really important to us, that like everybody had kind of their own unique sort of style as they're going through the game.
I also thought about that Peter Jackson film that he did. He did cities on giant land vehicles. I mean,
yeah.
When I was seeing anything about like, it would be cooler if they had like air vehicles, right? Because then they wouldn't have to be on the ground.
Right. Yeah. No. Is that one's Mortal Engines, right?
Yeah.
Someone asked us recently about that, and like that released right around the time we announced, but we'd been working on the game for like a year before that. And it was this weird like zeitgeist moment at the same time where like we didn't have any idea about this thing, and obviously they had no idea about us. And it just like right at the same time, everybody kind of came out with their moving city thing, which is pretty hilarious.
Yeah, I feel that's a difficult thing to do in game development. It was when you make a game and you've been working on it for 3 or 4 years, and you announce a release date trailer right around the same year as another similar game type comes out, and all of a sudden you're copying it. Like, it takes longer than like 6 months to copy something.
Yeah, right.
So talk about, like, in terms of scale, how big is this barren wasteland you can explore with your floating city?
Oh man, that's a good question. Zach's our world builder, kind of our level designer. He would know more accurate. I know we measure it in like units, and I don't know what a unit to a meter would be. But let's see, like I guess in terms of scale, the way that we play the game kind of on our own would take us about 7-8 hours to like complete the whole thing, to explore everything, to visit all the cities and all that. But I realized, like, especially the intro, what takes me half an hour ends up taking our playtesters like 2 hours or something. And so it's quite like extended for people who play it for the first time, because we balance it so that players who are just coming in have like a good time, aren't like stuck on anything. But if you know what you're doing, you can fast forward the game and like go a lot faster, like you can in any city builder. So I think we've made a much bigger game than we thought we were, basically. I'm curious to see like how long to beat says that it's going to take. We just really want to make sure that it feels good throughout it. So like kind of length and size isn't quite as important to us as that like it feels good throughout the experience, and it's not going to be boring for anybody at any point.
Yeah, I feel like the definitive Sim City build game was Sim City for the longest time, until like EA dropped the ball on it, and then City Skylines came in and like really kind of just reevaluated that whole genre. For someone who's like massively obsessed or really enjoys City Skylines, what kind of elements from that type of city simulator are you implementing in your game?
Yeah, so if you're coming at this from City Skylines, I guess what I would say is it's the city aspect to it is smaller in scope. And because of that, it has different things that you need to manage. So rather than building this metropolis that has lots of buildings and lots of problems like traffic and pollution and all of these things, think about it almost like you're building a village in the sky, right? You're building kind of a fantastical kingdom, but this kingdom has people in it in the hundreds. It's not like in the millions, right? And so then the question is, well, what are you then managing there? And it's things more like you're managing, getting food for your people, getting water for them, making sure they have housing, making sure that they have different entertainment options, whether it's like a tea house that they can go to, whether it's like a faith center where they can all conglomerate around, making sure that they're all healthy in certain ways. So like all of these things kind of impact it, but it's kind of a more intimate experience. It's like you're much more tied to the actual people on your kingdom, rather than thinking about them in graphs and charts and stuff like that. For people who like city builders, probably our closest comparisons in terms of sizing are Frostpunk or Kingdoms and Castles. That sort of like village town type scale. That's sort of where we're going with it.
Or it's like smaller in scale, but there's just as much to manage. Just doesn't mean that there's any less to manage because it's smaller in scale.
Right. Yeah. It's a different. They're basically just different verbs. They're different like action words, because it doesn't make sense to like manage traffic with 100 people in your city. But there's you can drill down pretty infinitely if you want to look at city building as a genre. You could manage like entire galaxies, or you could probably manage like 5 people, and it kind of depends on where on the scale you want to be in that. And we sort of chose this like town level where you start off in like the dozens of people and you grow into like the low 100, 200, that type of area.
Now, can you talk about your art design a little bit? Because when I was watching the gameplay, it had a very kind of Game of Thrones intro vibe. I saw like a lot of the little they're very simple shapes and textures, but it looked very nice and stylized.
Yeah, thanks. That's Chief Ong again, our art director, who kind of came up with the style. And it was Yeah, it's very unique for indie games. I feel like it's a little bit different. It's sort of like the not it is low poly, but not in the way that most people think of low poly. It's kind of like using hard edges and lines in like in an intentional way almost, and then on top of that layering in all of these different textures and decals and things like that. So it took him a long time to come up with this style. I think he was influenced a lot by, at the beginning we were looking a lot at like little toys and specifically like music boxes and how they all have these like gears and stuff on them. And then he was influenced quite a bit by this guy Daniel Agdad, who makes like these little really intricate, almost like ship in a bottle, but they're fantastical. And so they're like all these little buildings and things that just look weird and different and cool, and they're all built out of real wood. And that's sort of the style we were going for. And then there's like a painterly aspect also to the lighting in the game. It's heavily influenced by this kind of turn of the 19th century artist named Augustus Lamplaw, whose name I had to learn how to say because it's hard to spell. But he basically went and painted a bunch of scenes in North Africa, including like a lot of sunrise and sunset scenes across the Sahara Desert. And so you see a lot of like really interesting and beautiful landscape scenes that look very different from anything else that you've kind of seen in that era and in that style. And that's sort of the lighting, what inspired like a lot of the lighting and the color palette and the tone that we use in the game.
What do you think is the biggest challenge when making a city simulator, whether it's on the ground, in the air, or just in general?
Well, I can speak from a design perspective that it's managing the balance of everything, right? It's managing like, if suddenly I make one base building cost twice as much, that has like ripple effects throughout the game, because suddenly maybe that building is creating a new resource, and that resource is used to then create like 5 other buildings. And now you need more people because you need more buildings, so you need more people to work on those buildings. And now I need to balance like how many people you get all at once and where you get them and how they come into your city. So really it's like the intricate playing of it's what makes city builders magical, but also what makes them really hard to design is like it's the intricate balance between all of the kind of the different gears in the game, and how you can't ever make it perfect, but how close to being like really solid it has to be in order to not completely fall apart. If there's a couple numbers that are just entirely off, the game's just not fun anymore. And you can just half a number or double it, and suddenly it's way better. So understanding, what aspects of the game are fun and why, and really leaning into that tends to be a lot of numbers games, at least for me, who like I'm doing a lot of the city building balance stuff. So yeah, that's you've kind of nailed like my life these days is sort of like making sure the game is balanced really nicely progressively from the beginning to the end of it.
So talk about some of the fun buildings and stuff you can manage and create in your floating city.
I think some of the coolest stuff is things that are unique to being a flying city. So we were talking before about different technologies you can sort of find depending on which kingdoms you find first and which biomes you choose to go into and stuff. And so, for example, for generating lift, we have 4 different buildings that you can find in any order. And the map is entirely randomized. So like, I don't know which ones you'll find first, but they each have their own different aspects that are good and bad to them. So we have the fan, we have this like vertical kind of, a higher technology jet looking thing. There's wings, which are a more fantastical sort of like flappy device that keeps you in the air. There's like all these different, and then there's, which one am I missing? Hang on, there's the 4th one. Wings, fan, balloons, of course. Yeah, balloons that sort of like attach to your city and sort of bring you up. And each one of those has like unique aspects to it. So balloons, for example, I'll start with the one that I forgot first. They don't require any fuel for you to like travel around with them, but they're very expensive to make for the amount of lift you get from them, right? And so making your city dotted with these small little balloons all over the place is a lot different of gameplay experience than using something like the fan that uses a lot of fuel to really generate a lot of that lift and a lot of that, keeping your city up, but uses fewer people, uses fewer resources to build. And so you do have to, manage your coal income a lot better, which impacts the exploration as well. You know, your kingdom has to constantly be looking for coal deposits or generating them itself on your kingdom itself out of other resources, right? So paying attention to that stuff or not, depending on what you find, is I think a really cool aspect to our game. And because it's like themed in this airborne kind of city building type thing, it feels different in a way that we haven't seen before. And so I think that stuff's like some of the cooler aspects of the game.
You're also answering the age-old question of like what happens to a flying city with their waste and garbage.
Ooh, yeah, I don't actually think we truly answer that question. That's not we have a button that's like, hey, dump resources if you're overstocked on one or something. It's like last resort. But we kind of just hand wave that away. There's no real
Look
answer.
out below.
Yeah, exactly.
You're flying over
you know, the world is pretty barren. There's probably nobody underneath you. It's fine.
So what do you say is the biggest challenge when creating it doesn't necessarily have to be an indie game, just a video game in 2020?
Whoa, okay, that's cool. Well, like so indie games in particular too, like they're getting more and more complicated, right? It used to be that you could make a 2D side scroller and add a cool time mechanic to it or something, and then like boom, nobody's seen this before. It's great, it's amazing, and thankfully, in a lot of ways, tools have gotten way easier to pick up and use and learn how to make like your first basic indie game. That also means that way more people are making indie games, and so the line kind of between AAA and indie is very much blurring. And so what that means, at least for us in the indie space, is we suddenly have to be experts in fields that like we might not know anything about, right? So like technical art is basically the idea of taking something artistic but like making it out of code, writing shaders, writing different animations and like looping and stuff like that. Nobody on our team knew how to do that before this project, and so it's about plugging the holes that we don't really know exist until we get to them and we go, oh yeah, right, like back at Visceral we had a guy that just did this. That was it. That's all that they did. We don't have that guy anymore. One of us has to do this.